All right, here we have the women's under 23 lightweight 4. This is a straight final. So in the lane closest to our camera, that is St. Catharines, of course, the local club here. In lane 4, the next crew in, that is the Argonaut Rowing Club. Lane 5, that's a Wyandotte out from just outside Detroit. And lane 6, the farthest from our camera right now, that is the Wayland-Weston crew.
And they're rowing out of Massachusetts.
So really, we saw earlier the lightweight 8s, both the men and the women, all Canadian crews here. The lightweight 4, also a straight final like the 8s earlier, but we get a couple of American crews. So we're going to have to pay attention here, see who's going to be the victor. Argonaut just fell short in the women's lightweight 8, the senior women's lightweight 8. They just missed out. Ottawa kind of rode through them through the second half of the race. It was a, not only was it a straight final, there were just the two crews. So it might be a little more back and forth here with 4 crews. Interesting always, the straight final. You might not know. Maybe Argonaut and St. Catharines have raced through the summer. Maybe Wyandotte came up for Row Ontario Championships, but likely Wayland-Weston is a new face to these athletes, and they won't know perhaps what to expect.
Yeah, clean start there. Looks like in lane 3, Argonauts might have picked up a seat or two off the gun there. But over in lane 7, we have Wayland-Weston. Looks like even early in the race, they're starting to pull a little bit ahead. They were getting a flag from the umpire to make sure that they stay in their lane. This is a straight force. There's no coxie in the boat, so one of the athletes in this boat will have a tow cable attached to their shoe, and they're going to use that to adjust the rudder.
Yeah, and certainly one thing you want to make sure you're doing when you do have the steering tow, you don't want to really steer too much. You want to do really the minimum amount to keep yourself really within your lane, because the more you start to steer, that's just time that's going to be spent not only obviously adding to your course. We know the shortest space between point A, point B, straight line, that's what you want to get here, but also in the motion of steering, that process is going to unset the boat, make it less stable, more challenging to continue your boat speed and maintain your boat speed.
Yeah, what we just saw there was the umpire waving his flag, telling Argonauts that they need to get back into their lane. They were starting to get a little too close to Wyandotte, so they're making a correction now. If you just watch the yellow buoys, you can see where the oars are in relation to the buoys, and that will give you an idea of who's staying in their lane.
Yeah, it did look just before we panned away that St. Catharines Rowing Club might have been coming a little closer to our camera, a little more angled towards our camera than perhaps the finish line. So again, maybe a little bit of steering difficulties for some of these crews. Katie, I know, mentioned earlier when she was sitting in my seat doing some of the commentary, it is a bit of a crosswind, so a little more challenging conditions. We have mostly had head and tailwinds earlier this week, but we see here through 500 meters, Wayland-Weston with some open water lead over the rest of the field.
Yeah, that's quite impressive for them to have opened up that big of a lead at the 500-meter mark for a senior women's event. It's a fairly young crew out of Wayland-Weston. Their bow seat's 18, two seats 17, 3-seat Jamie Cook's 19, and Kyra's 18. So it's a really young crew to be racing in an under-23 event.
Wow, that is a lot of really young athletes, so doing an excellent job for their youth and for their presumably, at least to some degree, some inexperience compared to some of these more senior or at least under 23 athletes, maybe a little more drilled in some of the other crews. But Wayland-Weston, including the sisters, I imagine they're sisters, Jenna and Jamie Cook, the middle pair in the Wayland-Weston crew. And by my eye, it looks like they have a bucket rig to have the two sisters rowing on starboard side.
That's true. It looks like in lane 2 we have Argos, another young crew. Argos has two 17-year-olds, an 18-year-old, and 19-year-old. Wyandotte, a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old in the boat. The St. Catharines boat has some women in their early 20s, and that's a very experienced crew. So we'll have to see how they respond to these conditions. If they were comfortable letting the Wayland-Weston crew take the lead to the first 500, but try and reel them back in throughout the race.
Yeah, that is one thing I know you were mentioning earlier in the weekend in the broadcast. You're seeing a little more of that in racing at the club level, taking perhaps a little bit of inspiration from the Kiwis, particularly the Kiwi men's pair, where you just kind of, you do your race plan, your race profile, you get off the line, you get into a rhythm, and you, as much as you've let the other crews perhaps get a bit of a lead. Not that they don't pull off the start. They're obviously going as much as they can, but their race plan is to get into the killer rhythm. The killer rhythm, they're going to roll everyone back in, reel them in, crush some souls through the middle of the race.
Yeah, I think seeing that lead that Wayland-Weston had at this point, that's a considerable lead that I don't think the other crews are going to come back from. That's just too much of a lead. It's going to take something significant for Wayland-Weston to not hold on to this lead.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a substantial lead. One thing to note, again, I did mention they do have a bucket rig. Now, Mike, you do have a little more experience than I do as a coach. Why might you use a bucket rig?
At the senior level, in the straight fours, the idea is there might be a power imbalance between the athletes, so it's a way to even things out. Sometimes you'll see a tandem of two athletes in an 8 rowing that way, but in a 4, it varies. Some of it's preference. Some it might be an athlete has a difficult time following someone who's swinging out to the opposite side of their rigger. There are a number of reasons a coach might do it, but power imbalance is one, and then timing and rhythm would be another.
Interesting to know. Good for the folks at home to get that information. Of course, we have seen a number of bucket rigs and conventional rigs, port stroke and starboard stroke. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I do apologize. Maybe find a friend that pointed you to this live stream. They'll give you the full breakdown. But right now, we are approaching the 1,500 meter pylon. That's the 3/4 mark in the women's under 23 lightweight 4. It's Wayland-Weston's. Really, it's been their race from the start. We're 3/4 through. They have a pretty much insurmountable lead at this point. And one last thing to note, this is our final non-championship race of not only the day, of the week.
Yeah, the regatta is coming close to an end. This would be Wayland-Weston's first time winning this event. The first time the under 23 category was used in 2000 when Canadian Henley switched to an age-based categories as opposed to intermediate and senior. In the old days, you'd be an intermediate athlete until you won a major regatta, at which point you became a senior. So in 2000, when this started, it was won by Brock University. And since then, it's been won by St. Catharines 5 times, Kingston 3 times, and the University of Victoria 3 times. None of those clubs have, St. Catharines is the only one of those clubs entered in the event today.
None of those clubs really surprises. If you look at who have been strong contenders in the club and university circuit here in Canadian and really North American rowing, those are the names you might expect to hear when you're looking at the women's under 23 lightweight 4. One thing that I noticed as they were coming through that 500 or 1,500 meter pylon, just the incredible gap that Wayland-Weston has developed over 3/4 of the race. I think that must have been 15 seconds, if not more. I didn't even look at the clock, but there was a substantial gap between them leaving our screen on the left and the next bow ball coming on from the right.
Yeah, you'll see that sometimes in straight finals. The nice thing with heats and finals, or heats and semis, is you tend to separate a little bit of the wheat from the chaff. And in straight finals, you don't know what you're going to get. The under 23 lightweight category throughout the week has seen a number of straight finals. But we have here Wayland-Weston comfortably in the lead, bowed by Zoe Coachling, 2-seat Jenna Cook, 3-seat her sister Jamie Cook, and stroked by Kyra Patterson. Just waiting for some other boats to come on the screen. It looked like Argos out of Toronto were sitting in second. A very young crew out of Argos. The Argonaut Rowing Club, also home to a number of Olympians, Paralympians. Victoria Nolan, who rowed in the Paralympic Games for Canada. Brian Price, Coxie for the Canadian Men's 8 in Beijing Olympics. A number of Olympiads. Also Marnie McBean.
Marnie McBean, a very notable name, of course, in Canadian rowing, just a dominant athlete in the 1990s, winning multiple Olympic gold medals, really. Small boats, big boats. She could do pretty much everything, and, a very fun person to have a conversation with.
She is. It looks like Wayland-Weston enjoying the joys of being a Canadian Henley champion. They're going to head into the grandstand dock for their medal presentation, have their photo taken by the legendary Stan Lipinski, who is known as a Silver Badger. He was a part of the first graduating class at Brock University.
I did not know that. That's really cool.
Yeah, there's your Jeopardy trivia for today.